Even as India-US talks and negotiations continue on a multi-billion-dollar bilateral trade deal, the world's two largest democracies are clashing now at the World Trade Organization. India has now proposed slapping reciprocal tariffs on 29 American products after the US imposed tariffs on Indian steel. The impact of Trump tariffs is being felt globally, and the World Trade Organization has now become the latest flashpoint. Washington is claiming in the WTO that there was no basis to India's retaliatory tariffs after America imposed duties on Indian steel and aluminium. Continuing tariff rhetoric against India at the World Trade Organization, the American delegation stated, quote, "The US will not discuss Section 232 tariffs under Agreement on Safeguards as we do not view the tariffs as a safeguard measure," unquote. US side seems rattled after India proposed retaliatory duties on 29 American products including apples, almonds and pears, claiming the new US tariffs on steel and aluminium would affect $7.6 billion in trade. Even as both the countries close in on the first tranche of a bilateral trade agreement, the trade tussle in WTO is still ongoing. New Delhi believes its retaliatory tariffs would rack up $1.91 billion in duties, which would offset some of the impact of new US tariffs on Indian steel and aluminium. A government official revealed to the Deccan Herald how India's current notification to the World Trade Organization Council for Trade in Goods against US steel and aluminium tariffs only reserves India's right under Agreement on Safeguards to retaliate. The source added, quote, "It is for India to decide whether to effectuate these proposed retaliation after 30 days of the notification or later, or resolve it as part of the ongoing BTA negotiations," unquote. Meanwhile, India's trade negotiations with the US is entering the final leg, with US trade delegation likely to arrive in India next month. The visit is aimed at quickly wrapping up the negotiations by the end of 90-day Trump tariff pause, which ends on the 9th of July. Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal is also set to hold discussions with members of Export Promotion Council. The Indian government seeks the elimination of 26% reciprocal Trump tariffs as well as duty-free entry for labor-intensive export items, including Indian textiles and footwear. The US administration remarks come a week after Goyal held discussions with his counterpart Howard William Lutnick on the 19th of May to advance the bilateral trade talks. CNBC reports that the meeting between the officials was extremely fruitful and that both sides could reach a deal as early as next week. Now, only a political clearance and a nod is required from the highest levels, possibly from US President Donald Trump as well as Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. It's highly unlikely for the US administration to completely exempt India from tariffs, as a 10% tax is still expected on certain Indian goods. At the same time, there could be zero duty access for some Indian exports, especially in labor-intensive sectors and goods produced by small and medium enterprises. On the other hand, leaders of major Indian companies such as Dixon Technologies, Tata Consumer Products, Blue Star and others observed how Bharat will benefit from India's advantageous position. This is due to expanding businesses and inquiries from their American associates and chance of expanding business activities in the lucrative American markets. Even as Donald Trump mounts pressure for local production, manufacturing in India for export still remains far more economically viable and lucrative for major players. The fact that China faces 30% US tariffs currently compared to India's currently suspended 26% also presents a positive outlook for top executives and exporters. But what's the holdup? The current United States law mandates approval from the US Congress before lowering tariffs below the MFN or most favored nation levels. However, the US administration can remove reciprocal tariffs unilaterally as well. Negotiations have been taking place at a faster pace between India and the US as part of their program called Mission 500. This aims to increase bilateral trade between the two sides to $500 billion by 2030, an agreement reached between US President Donald Trump and Indian Prime Minister Modi during his visit to the White House in February this year. As of 2024, the bilateral trade between India and the US stood at a record $118.2 billion, with India enjoying a $36.8 billion trade surplus. In FY24, India exported goods worth $77.5 billion to the US, while imports from America stood at $40.7 billion. So what's the current status of the US-India trade partnership? From 2021 to 2024, the US was India's largest trading partner, marginally ahead of China as well as the European Union. India's trade surplus in 2024 was $41 million. It was $35.3 billion in 2023-24, $27.7 billion a year earlier in 2022-23, $32.8 billion in 2021-22, and $22.7 billion in 2020-21. In 2023, India's merchandise exports to the United States touched $83.7 billion, with imports at $40.1 billion. In terms of services, Indian exports to the US reached $36.3 billion, with imports at $29.6 billion. Between April 2000 and September 2024, India also received $67.8 billion in foreign direct investment from the US. However, in terms of total numbers, India is ranked 10th on the list of US trading partners, and New Delhi would like to see that improve. Accounting for around 18% of total exports, the United States is currently India's largest export market, contributing approximately 2.2% to India's GDP in FY24. However, India-US ties are not just defined by trade. The world's two largest democracies are strategic partners and face common geopolitical challenges as well as interests. Yet, the ongoing dispute at the World Trade Organization needs to be sorted. The United States also needs to speed up fighter jet engine deliveries for India's Tejas fighter jet as well as Apache helicopter deliveries, all of which have been delayed multiple times. Such roadblocks have resulted in Indians asking the serious question: can India trust America as a long-term geopolitical ally? Leave a comment with your opinion, hit the like button, and subscribe to Inconnect News.